Your paycheck makes you feel rich for 3 seconds, then broke for 27 days. Here's why. Payday creates one of the most dangerous illusions in personal finance. The moment your paycheck hits your account, your brain interprets that number as abundance, even though nothing about your actual financial reality has changed. Bills are still due, obligations still exist, and future expenses are already waiting. Yet for a brief window, usually just a few seconds or minutes, you feel rich. That emotional spike is powerful because it replaces stress with relief. And relief feels like permission. Permission to relax. Permission to spend. Permission to stop thinking strategically. This is where most financial damage happens. Not because people are irresponsible, but because the human brain is wired to respond to short-term signals, not long-term outcomes. That 4-digit balance doesn't represent freedom, progress, or stability. It represents cash flow passing through your hands. When payday is treated like a reward instead of a checkpoint, money becomes reactive instead of intentional. The illusion convinces you that there is plenty of time to think about saving later, investing later, or planning later. But later never arrives, because expenses don't wait. Rent, utilities, transportation, food, and social commitments immediately begin competing for attention. Each individual expense feels reasonable, justified, even necessary. The problem isn't any single purchase. It's the absence of a plan before spending begins. What makes the payday illusion so destructive is that it resets every month. You feel broke at the end of the cycle. Promise yourself you'll do better next time. Then repeat the exact same behavior when the next paycheck arrives. This creates confusion and frustration because it feels like money is disappearing mysteriously. In reality, it's being spent exactly as designed by habit, emotion, and timing. Without structure, income is consumed automatically. The paycheck doesn't fail you. It simply exposes the lack of a system. Over time, this illusion trains your brain to associate income with relief rather than progress. Instead of seeing money as a tool to build stability, you experience it as a temporary escape from anxiety. This keeps you locked in a short-term thinking, where decisions are made to feel better now rather than stronger later. Even raises don't fix the problem, because higher income just creates a larger illusion, not a better strategy. The balance looks bigger, the spending increases, and the stress returns on schedule. The payday illusion isn't about greed or lack of discipline. It's about conditioning. When money arrives without a predefined role, it will always drift toward comfort and convenience. Until that illusion is broken, no amount of income will ever feel like enough, and financial progress will always feel just out of reach. Most people believe their financial problems come from not earning enough. But the deeper issue is that income arrives without a clear hierarchy. When every dollar has the same priority, urgent expenses dominate and long-term goals are silently pushed aside. This is where the idea of eating the frog applies to money. The hardest and most uncomfortable financial action is not paying rent or buying groceries, because those are socially reinforced and emotionally justified. The real difficulty is prioritizing your future before satisfying your present. Paying yourself first feels counterintuitive because it challenges survival instincts that tell you to take care of immediate needs before anything else. When income hits your account, your brain instinctively scans for threats. Bills, obligations, and responsibilities register as dangers that must be neutralized quickly. Saving and investing don't trigger the same emotional urgency because they don't solve a visible problem right now. This causes people to delay them indefinitely. The mistake is assuming that what feels urgent is what's most important. In reality, urgency is often just noise, while importance operates quietly in the background. Paying yourself first forces a reordering of priorities that aligns money with outcomes rather than emotions. The act of transferring money to savings or investments before spending does something subtle but powerful. It turns your future self into a non-negotiable obligation instead of an afterthought. Once that transfer happens, the remaining money must adapt to reality instead of wishful thinking. This creates natural discipline without constant self-control. Rather than asking, "Can I afford this?" you begin asking, "Is this worth using what's left?" That shift alone changes spending behavior more effectively than budgeting apps or motivational speeches. This approach also exposes the difference between true necessities and habits that merely feel essential. When money is limited by design, choices become clearer. Expenses that once felt untouchable suddenly become adjustable. Convenience loses its authority, and intentional trade-offs take its place. This isn't about restriction. It's about clarity. The discomfort people feel when paying themselves first isn't financial. It's psychological. It forces a confrontation with how much of their lifestyle is built on assumption rather than choice. Over time, consistently paying yourself first rewires how money is experienced. Instead of feeling like something that disappears despite your effort, money starts to feel cooperative. Progress becomes visible, even if the amounts are small. That visibility builds trust in the process, which reduces anxiety and impulsive behavior. The frog never becomes pleasant, but it becomes normal. And once the hardest action is handled at the beginning, everything else feels lighter. What once required constant willpower becomes routine. And that routine quietly builds momentum that most people never achieve because they never change the order. A major reason people stay trapped in financial stress is not the size of their income, but the absence of a buffer between them and chaos. Without that buffer, every unexpected expense feels catastrophic. A flat tire, a medical bill, a broken phone, or a delayed paycheck instantly turns into panic because there is no margin for error. When this happens repeatedly, the nervous system begins to associate money with danger. Financial decisions stop being strategic and become reactive, driven by the need to make the pain go away as quickly as possible. This is where the role of an emergency fund becomes psychologically transformative. It is not just a pile of money sitting idle. It is a boundary between inconvenience and disaster. When that boundary does not exist, life events force people into debt, favors, or desperation. Credit cards become emergency tools instead of financial instruments. Loans become survival bridges instead of strategic leverage. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where every crisis pushes someone further behind, making the next crisis even more damaging. The presence of an emergency fund changes how the brain interprets risk. Instead of viewing uncertainty as a threat, it becomes manageable. A car repair no longer triggers fear because the outcome is already accounted for. A job disruption no longer feels like an immediate collapse because time has been purchased in advance. That time is the real asset. It allows decisions to be made calmly instead of under pressure. Calm decisions are almost always better decisions, especially when money is involved. Without this buffer, even disciplined people struggle to make progress. They may invest, save, or budget perfectly for months, only to have one unexpected expense erase everything. This creates discouragement and reinforces the belief that building wealth is impossible. The truth is that progress was never protected. The system was fragile. An emergency fund stabilizes the entire structure by absorbing shocks that would otherwise derail it. Once that stability exists, behavior changes naturally. People stop borrowing for small emergencies. They stop using future income to solve present problems. They stop negotiating with themselves about whether an expense is truly urgent. The answer is already built into the system. Money becomes less emotional and more functional. Instead of reacting to life, people begin responding to it. This shift compounds over time. Fewer emergencies turn into debt. Fewer debts mean fewer payments. Fewer payments mean more flexibility. More flexibility creates confidence. And confidence improves decision-making across every area of life. What looks like a simple financial step is actually a psychological upgrade. It moves someone from constant defense into quiet control, where money stops being a source of fear and starts becoming a tool. One of the most misunderstood turning points in personal finance is the moment someone begins investing consistently. Not because they suddenly have extra money, but because they finally accept that waiting is far more expensive than starting small. Most people believe investing is something you do after your life is in order, after debts are gone, income is higher, and stability is guaranteed. In reality, investing is what creates order over time. Delaying it doesn't reduce risk. It magnifies it. The power of investing early is not rooted in intelligence, timing, or luck. It is rooted in time itself. Time allows compounding to do work that effort cannot replicate. A small amount invested consistently grows not because of aggressive strategies, but because it has more years to multiply. When people delay, they are not just skipping growth. They are giving up years that can never be recovered. Money can be replaced. Time cannot. This is why starting early feels uncomfortable. It requires committing resources today for a future that feels abstract. The reward is delayed, invisible, and quiet. There is no immediate dopamine hit, no dramatic lifestyle change. But beneath the surface, momentum is building. Each contribution reinforces the habit of prioritizing the future, and that habit becomes more valuable than the investment itself. Over time, consistency matters more than precision. Perfect strategies fail without persistence, while simple strategies succeed when followed relentlessly. Investing also rewires how people think about money. Instead of seeing income as something to be consumed, it becomes something to be deployed. Each dollar is viewed not only for what it can buy today, but for what it can generate tomorrow. This shift changes behavior automatically. Spending becomes intentional instead of impulsive. Short-term pleasure is weighed against long-term security, not through guilt, but through clarity. There is also a psychological advantage that often goes unnoticed. People who invest regularly experience less fear during financial downturns. They understand that volatility is not a signal to stop, but a condition of growth, because they are focused on decades rather than months. Market fluctuations lose their emotional power. This emotional stability is what allows long-term investors to outperform, not because they know more, but because they react less. Consistent investing creates a quiet sense of ownership over the future. Instead of depending solely on a paycheck, there is an awareness that money is working independently in the background. That awareness reduces anxiety and increases patience. It encourages long-term thinking in career choices, relationships, and lifestyle decisions. Investing is not just a financial action. It is a declaration that the future matters enough to be funded today, even when it feels inconvenient. Wealth is often portrayed as a result of bold moves and dramatic decisions. But in reality, it is shaped far more by restraint than by action. The ability to pause, endure uncertainty, and remain committed to a long-term direction is what separates lasting wealth from temporary success. Patience is not passive waiting. It is an active choice to allow processes to unfold without interference. In finance, this quality becomes a quiet force that compounds results over time. Most financial mistakes are not caused by lack of information, but by emotional pressure. Fear pushes people to exit too early, while excitement pulls them into decisions that are poorly timed. Patience neutralizes both extremes. It creates space between impulse and action, allowing decisions to be guided by perspective rather than urgency. Over long periods, this emotional regulation becomes a competitive advantage that no strategy alone can provide. Discipline reinforces patience by turning it into behavior. It shows up in the repetition of small, unremarkable actions that feel insignificant in the moment but accumulate meaning through consistency. These actions do not rely on motivation or optimism. They persist even when outcomes are unclear or progress appears slow. Discipline transforms uncertainty from a threat into a normal condition of growth. Time plays a central role in this process. Financial systems reward duration, not speed. Assets mature, skills compound, and opportunities align gradually. When patience and discipline are present, time becomes an ally rather than an obstacle. Without them, time feels like pressure, amplifying doubt and encouraging premature decisions. The same years can either build stability or erode it, depending entirely on how they are used. There is also a deeper psychological shift that occurs when patience becomes part of one's financial identity. Short-term comparisons lose their influence. External noise fades. Progress is measured internally, against personal benchmarks rather than public outcomes. This internal focus reduces stress and increases confidence, even during periods where visible results are minimal. Ultimately, sustainable wealth reflects emotional maturity more than technical brilliance. It grows in environments where calm decisions outlast reactive ones. where long-term commitment outweighs short-term validation. Patience and discipline do not guarantee immediate rewards, but they create conditions where growth becomes inevitable. Over time, this quiet consistency reshapes not only financial outcomes, but the way individuals relate to uncertainty, effort, and the future itself. If this helped you rethink money, watch my next video right here. Your future self will thank you.